The views and opinions expressed by the hosts of this podcast are those of the individual and not of any affiliated companies. Occasional adult language is used.
Welcome to the ShamTalk podcast, the #1 Notre Dame athletics podcast in the world. Today, the guys talk about this weekend's big matchup against Ohio State and what it means to host ESPN's College Gameday. And now, from Duncan Student Center, here's your host, Jake Miller.
Well, welcome back finally. I think it's been 2 or 3 months since we did this last time. Over Zoom, we're in person. You won't be able to tell, but here in Duncan Student Center, actually, Jake Irons is off tonight. Jake Miller, JJ Posty, Andrew McGuinness with you. We got a big game. We have to have a podcast for a big game. It just wouldn't be right without it.
I mean, it's Ohio State, Notre Dame. What more can you say? These are two of the biggest brands in college sports, two of the certainly biggest brands in the Midwest region. You know, a game that only really gets played once every, historically a few decades. You know, it's a rivalry renewed, so to speak. I think, there's been a lot of talk in the build-up about, the modern history of the Ohio State-Notre Dame rivalry. The two teams didn't really play each other for, I think, 2 decades now, at least until last year's contest. And it's a game that I think is going to have maybe some renewed animosity. I think these two fan bases remembered after last year. They don't like each other very much. I think last year there was almost a sense of, I wouldn't say it was nice per se, but I think there was a little less, salt in the wound, so to speak, for Notre Dame and Ohio State fans because they hadn't played each other since 1995. So I think this year, obviously you had the game last year. You have Notre Dame fans, maybe with a little more optimism than they did last year, thinking that this could be the year. Ohio State fans, obviously the expectation is always competing for the national title there. It should be a good one. I think it's going to be one in South Bend where it's going to be one to remember. We'll get to that later about if is this perhaps the most anticipated match we've had at Notre Dame Stadium in at least a decade, I think is the consensus we're going to come to.
Yeah, it's nice for there to finally be a big Notre Dame football game and Notre Dame to have a decided advantage at quarterback. It's been a long time since we can say that. Maybe, I mean, obviously you'd have to go through opponents, obviously, but like, off the top of my head, like the Bush push, maybe would be the. I mean, they wouldn't say that there was a decided advantage because they were going against a really good Matt Leinart. But yeah, obviously Notre Dame has an advantage at quarterback. It's the most important position in football. It's a huge thing for them to have, especially because they don't have a ton of advantages elsewhere, but we'll get to that too. And also just College Gameday. I know it's stating the obvious, but the first time they've been on campus in half a decade, not counting the 2020 Clemson game when they were here, but no one could do anything. It's going to be an incredible atmosphere, I think. I mean, Notre Dame Stadium's had some big games in recent years, but I think this is going to be a step above everything that we've seen before.
Before we dive into the game, I think we have to talk about the idea of what this game means. And really, is this game going to be something that Notre Dame would play in 10 years? And, I'm the realignment expert among everybody, but self-proclaimed, of course. But, okay, if you take a look at what the college football playoff is going to become, the top 12 teams, the importance of strength of schedule is going to go way down, right? For a team like Notre Dame, if they're going to be able to win out, unless the world changes, they're going to get in every year. And Notre Dame has an Alabama home-and-home scheduled, Texas A&M starting next year, Michigan coming back, I believe, after 2030. But it begs the question, are these home series with major Power 5 teams going to stop being played?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm of the mindset that the 12-team playoff will encourage and eventually realignment will encourage more and more marquee out-of-conference matchups because, I think with the 12-team playoff, and this is all conjunction, we're yet to see how the 12-team playoff, which in its present form is set up to go for a Power 5 system, not a Power 2 system or Power 3, whatever you want to call it. We're yet to see how it'll adjust that, but I suspect it will place a pretty heavy emphasis on Big Ten and SEC teams, and they will get the lion's share of the advantage in the bids, and I think that'll encourage them to say we're willing to test ourselves out of conference because we know if we're a program like Ohio State, if we're a program like Alabama, if we're a program like Michigan, we can have maybe not our best year in conference play, we can lose a game. And we're still fine. And you can afford, if you can lose a game in conference, you can also afford to lose a game out of conference. A 2-loss Bama team is making a 12-team playoff, especially when we factor in the fact that they're probably going to put a little more Big Ten and SEC. Some would say bias, some would say weight, depending on what terminology you want to use. There's going to be more emphasis on the new 2-power team conferences in this new system. I think that'll encourage teams to test themselves a little more and maybe try to make that marquee statement that Notre Dame's going to try to make, at least on Saturday.
And Notre Dame looks lucky now, considering that these teams they've scheduled are Big Ten SEC teams that were scheduled 5-6 years ago. You don't have a lot of current or future Big 12 or Pac in there, so yeah, it definitely worked out for them.
Yeah, I don't know if people have realized this yet, but college is really like making money. They like it a lot. And games like Ohio State and Notre Dame are going to make a lot of money. So will the Notre Dame A&M series when that happens. So will the Notre Dame Bama series when that happens. So kind of to Jake's point, or to JJ's point, sorry. I agree with you, but I also think like you're kind of missing the main point, which is just
Money.
Yep.
Yeah.
Here comes the money. Money. I don't know the rest of the famous Shane McMahon song.
Ticket prices through the roof for Notre Dame Stadium. Parking prices also through the roof. Some parking tickets I've seen hundreds of dollars for the Joy slot closest to the stadium. Kind of crazy, but the tailgating scene does matter. Within the stadium, it'll be a good game. It might not be a quarterback battle. We'll have to see what Ohio State's able to bring out. But what is the matchup you're interested in that you think will have the biggest effect on the game?
I think it's very easy to look at the wide receivers cornerback matchup for Ohio State's receivers and Notre Dame's cornerbacks. I think that's very justified. I think that is probably in fact the marquee matchup. But I think I want to look a little somewhere different and look at Notre Dame's defensive line versus Ohio State's offensive line, because Notre Dame's defensive line, it's gotten, I'd say, mixed reviews through the first 4 games. It hasn't been bad, to be clear, but it also hasn't exactly been a destructive force, and that's not a problem when you're playing the likes of Navy, Tennessee State, NC State to some extent. Because you don't really you can trust Cam Hart and Benjamin Morrison to, drop back in coverage, handle their assignments. They will, they can take time and, they won't relapse. Ohio State has the game breakers to, if you make Kyle McCord sit in the pocket, or if you allow, I should say, Kyle McCord to sit in the pocket for 5 seconds, 6 seconds, if they give the talent the time to run around that field, they will get open. So as much as I think it's important that Benjamin Morrison and Cam Hart, stay dutiful to their assignments and be, the best cornerback duo Notre Dame's had in however many years, because I believe that is what they are. I think it's more important, perhaps, that the thing that they can't control, which is Kyle McCord being pressured, that needs to happen. Notre Dame can't win this game unless they are getting into the pocket to any extent, and then it's not going to require some massive step forward. Riley Mills doesn't need to have 3 sacks. Javonte Jean-Baptiste doesn't need to have 5 tackle for losses. It doesn't need to be an exorbitant amount, but there needs to be some degree of discomfort from McCord in the pocket where he doesn't feel like he can take all day and wait for the likes of Marvin Harrison Jr. to just get open. Because if he does have all day in the pocket, that will happen.
Yeah, I'm going to stay with the line of scrimmage, but I'm going to flip it on its head and look at Notre Dame's offensive line against Ohio State's defensive line. Notre Dame offensive line has not looked very good so far, folks. I mean, especially when you factor in the quality competition. I mean, you don't want to see Sam Hartman's knee getting twisted against any opponent, but especially not against Central Michigan. And Ohio State, Notre Dame is known as tight end U. Ohio State's gotten quite a few good pass rushers out in recent years. Obviously, Chase Young, probably the most prolific among that group. I was reading up a little bit. It doesn't sound like they have someone of quite that profile, and they have struggled to get sacks so far this year, but it's kind of a similar story to Notre Dame in that they're getting a lot of hurries and pressures. They just haven't gotten the payoff just yet. I think they're going to very heavily target Pat Coogan and Rocco Spindler at guard, and the Irish are going to have to find a way, whether it's having Jabran Payne, who's been good in pass blocking, whether he gets some more snaps, whether it's utilizing their tight ends. Obviously, Mitchell Evans seems like he'll be back this week, which should be a big boost for this Notre Dame team. Notre Dame's going to have to find a way to protect Sam Hartman because he's a great quarterback, yes, but he's only as good as the amount of time that he has, and the Irish have to find a way to make sure he gets that.
Yeah, and that offensive line to me is interesting too, because it feels like it's been a tale of 2 lines, so to speak, in terms of the rush game, the pass game. In the rush game, Notre Dame's line's been quite good. They had that one play against NC State that really comes to mind where they switched up the alignment a little bit. They had Joe Halt motion out and be kind of a extra right tackle, I guess you could call it. And they've done some funky stuff with pulling, and it's worked really well. But in pass protection, you're exactly right. Coogan and Spindler, they haven't been bad by any means, but they haven't been the players on a Joe Moore award-winning unit that Notre Dame usually expects to have. So I think the Jabran Payne shout is a very good one. I don't know if that's something we'll see more of on Saturday, but I do think it's an interesting solution because he is definitely, at least if the coaches are to believe, the clear preference in terms of blocking backs on a passing down. And I'm not sure how you balance that with Audric Estime, who's been, looked much more like a bell cow than another head in the 5-headed monster that we kind of maybe we're anticipating. Maybe
the 5-headed monster that's already lost at least one head.
The 5-headed monster is more like a 1-headed monster with 4 arms. I guess is the best way to put it.
Davenport's become an extremity at this point.
I mean, it's weird because I can't decide if Audric is what's making the 5-headed monster look good, or Audric looks good because they constantly to worry about, they take him out. Well, look, they've got 3 other really good running backs in there. And I can't tell if it's a correlation, causation, which one is driving the other. But at any rate, it works well for Notre Dame.
But his proportion of touches last week is way up, which makes you think, are they really going to continue this 5 running back circle?
I think
really just
Ford-
going to be boom, 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 boom.
I think it's more of a three-headed monster. Or
Yeah.
I guess a 2.5 head. Okay, so we're getting really into the monster analogy.
You take
I'll put it
Price
this
in
way.
there.
I'll put it this way. I think Estime has established himself as the bell cow. Payne is the situational guy. On third down, they like having Payne in because he can move out of the backfield. He's a good pass protection guy. And I think they see Love and Price kind of in the same way, which is kind of your change of pace, speed, gadget guy. I think they're going to kind of use those two interchangeably in the same role. And I think Ford's just a special teams guy at this point.
Yeah, you look at carries, 63 for Estime, then 19 for Payne, 18 for Love, 16 for Price, and 2 for Ford, both of which I think may have come in the Navy game. At least one did.
Yeah, at this point, Ford has equal to or less carries than Skip Vallata, which I think is probably not a good sign as to, obviously Skip Vallata's carries came in a different context as Devin Ford, but the fact that
Sam Asaph moved the chains last week.
Sam Asaph with probably more first downs. But yeah, no, and obviously, garbage time touches versus real touches for Ford. But I think it speaks to the fact that Ford is definitely the fifth person on that depth chart. And I think they kind of maybe wanted to focus a little more on that special teams role because that's very clearly where I think that's what they brought him in for in the first place. I think they kind of wanted to gas up the five-headed monster because it sounds really good and it makes teams think, hey, we got to prepare for all these guys. But I think from the start, Ford was meant to be a special teams addition, and he's looked, the part of a player they want to have out there on special teams downs. I think that's what he's going to be going for. They don't need to kind of try to make teams think it's a five-headed, backfield anymore because I think teams now have seen 4 games worth of content and know, okay, we know which of the backs are going to be coming at us, and it's probably going to be the 230-pound bull and not the other 4.
Watch a lot of runs to the left. You're probably not going to want to attack Joe Alt, but we assume they'll stack the box on that side. Joe Alt, just named today the FWAA National Player of the Week. 100 pass blocks so far, and no pressure still on there. I guess we got to ask the question, though, what is this game going to look like? The line set at 54 for over/under. Is it going to be an offensive game? Ohio State had a big week last week against Western Kentucky. What's your prediction? Not ShamBookie here, not giving our odds, but what does this game look like in terms of points?
I think it's going to be very balanced, very back and forth. I don't think you're going to see, going back to the Clemson game from a couple years ago, the 2021, that was a fairly high-scoring game. Notre Dame had the lead for most of it. I think you're going to see both teams trading punches, going back and forth. I don't think anyone's going to get to a very big lead in this game. I think big mistakes are probably going to be in a minimal. Obviously, for the turnover battle will be huge, certainly. But I don't think we're going to see a ton. Obviously, you have a very experienced quarterback at Hartman who has not thrown an interception this year, and that was his one big bugaboo coming over from Wake Forest, and he's limited that so far. Kyle McCord's only thrown 1 pick as well. Obviously, neither has faced the most robust competition, and Hartman has lost a fumble this year. But I think for the most part, this is going to be a very methodically played game. And I think that's the way Notre Dame wants it to be played because of the talent Ohio State has at running back and especially wide receiver. They are certainly talented at running back too, but receiver, they're a step behind for sure. So I think it's going to be a very back and forth game. I think 54 is a good line to set. I think I'm looking at my prediction now, and I have 55, so I think that tells you right then and there. Yeah, I think it's going to be very back and forth. If the over hits, it's not hitting until the fourth quarter.
Yeah, I think the interesting analog for this game is going to be last year's Ohio State Notre Dame game because we saw Notre Dame play, I think, a very almost intentionally kneecap strategy. I think as the season went on, we saw that team was definitely outmatched, but they were able to hang around, until the fourth quarter. And, even though it was kind of clear for most of the second half, Ohio State was probably going to win that game, and Notre Dame was kind of just playing for pride at that point. I think they showed that, they could, at least that year's Notre Dame team was able to, even though they had some clear talent deficiencies, get Ohio State down in the mud, make the game be played on their terms. And even though Ohio State eventually won, that style of 21-10 game, it was not one that they didn't have to work for. And I think it's interesting to see you contrast this year where I think Notre Dame, I think they're going to want to play a similar style of game. They don't want to turn this into track meet. But now they have the quarterback to play more methodically and also be able to hit that deep shot and maybe open the game up a little bit. Because Notre Dame, I think they game scripted against Ohio State very well. I think they did as well as they really realistically could do, given the disadvantages that were always going to be at play. Obviously, 10 points is never going to be, good in any context. But, when you look at how Buckner and Pine have done at their new respective stops since, I think you can maybe get a little sympathy for that 10-point scoreline. So I think Notre Dame's going to try to, I wouldn't say slow the tempo per se. I don't think we're going to see, like last year against Clemson when Notre Dame held onto the ball very deliberately for 10 minutes at a time to try to take as much time off the clock as possible. I don't think we're going to see that, but I do think they're going to try to, maybe get this game more of methodical, and they're going to do so, knowing that, the last year they were able to keep it close for 3 quarters, and this year they can do that same thing, except now they have an All-American at quarterback.
Interesting to see the change here, especially also on the special team side. Notre Dame, and from the punt and kick return standpoint this year, not much there. And Spencer Schrader coming in to transfer from South Florida, 3 for 6 so far. He did have that long field goal for 54.
He's
but
got a leg.
He has a leg, but the accuracy is the question. Interestingly, Ohio State also a little bit of a question mark. Jaden Fielding come over from there, true sophomore, didn't see any meaningful action last year. He's 3 for 3 this year, but with 2 22s and a 40. He has not kicked a field goal in the last 2 weeks. So from a kicking perspective, it's a game where, as much as we consider, can you get those 3 points, especially from Notre Dame's perspective and from Ohio State's, considering that it's a young rookie kicker, are you willing to sacrifice the potential of poor field position? You miss the kick, and that can be a huge thing for the game. We'll have to see.
Context, I mean, who knows if this is what's going to come down to. If Notre Dame is, got the ball with, a minute left, and they get to the, say the 35.
Yeah.
I'm very interested to see what Freeman's, what his line is for Schrader to kick from. It's very clear they think he's got a leg, but it's also very clear that, the kicks he's had from that distance are not exactly, make or break kicks in one of the biggest games of the season. Do they send him out from 58, with the game on the line? And, maybe they will, maybe they won't. But I do think if it comes down to that, I will be very interested in seeing what kind of the line to go is for Notre Dame. Do they try to push it all the way down to the 30, or are they willing to have Schrader line up from the 35 and have at it? It's probably very unlikely the game comes down to that specific set of circumstances where we get to find out what their value on him is in the true clutch. But it's something to watch for because, like you said, he's got a leg. The accuracy is always there's no kicker in the world that is, automatic from 55 plus, but 50% is especially noticeable, especially even against Navy. The first kicking this wasn't exactly a long bomb either. But Schrader, I think, is going to be an asset for this Notre Dame team in the long run. We'll see how much of an asset he is against Ohio State in a game that, very well, like Andrew said, I don't think either team's going to run away with this match. I think it's going to stay within, at minimum, 2 scores the entire game. And, in a game like that, having a good kicker is, you never know how valuable it is until you look at the score at the end of the game and say, hey, we lost by 6 points and maybe we missed 2 field goals.
Yeah, with Schrader, I think the biggest thing in terms of that analysis, just look at what Notre Dame's done in the past few weeks. They've trusted him from deep. Even after he missed the first one short against Central Michigan last week, they trotted him right back out there from 50. So, the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. Notre Dame is showing a willingness to trust Spencer Schrader on deep field goals. I think it's probably going to continue.
He said himself, he's made it from 75 in a hurricane. I don't know what his range
The
will
wind
look
must have been at his back.
I don't know what his range will look like. I know that's true, or what his range will look like on what is set to be a hot night in South Bend, at least for late September. But, I don't know how much wind was at his back, but make 75 yards in any context is pretty nuts.
We've all seen those Instagram videos, and, it's a line drive kick, no height on it. But who knows? Maybe that'll just get it done past an offensive lineman. And another interesting thing that I'll bring up is that as much as Notre Dame is a more experienced team, overall, you bring Sam Hartman in, Otter Custom, you could say is an experienced. They got a lot of experienced guys on defense. For Hartman, this is by far the biggest game of his career, but he really hasn't played in a lot of meaningful time matchups during his time at Wake, right? And at Ohio State, especially as Kyle McCord comes in, he hasn't played in anything meaningful. It'll be interesting to see what the stress does to both of those. I don't think that's something we can analyze a lot. It's just what happens in the game, but something definitely to consider and to take on. Let's talk a little bit about the history of this matchup. Last time Notre Dame beat Ohio State back in 1934. Very different game, very different state of the country, very different what both of these schools were. I mean, Notre Dame was not an academic powerhouse in 1934. What do we think campus looked like back then?
Well, I mean, I'm trying to think what the oldest building I know on campus is, and then trying to see if that even was around in 1934, 1935. I mean, you look at.
I'm wondering the Basilica.
I'm still looking at the Wikipedia page of the teams that were independent in the Midwest in 1935, and we've got Michigan State, which is normal, until you realize there's also Michigan State Normal in Normal, Michigan, which is they went, apparently, according to Wikipedia, take this for what you will, I have no idea if Wikipedia is accurate on their 1930s football. They went 4-2-2 with ties against Illinois State Normal and Hope College of Michigan in Holland, right up the road. They played every one of their games except for one in Michigan, including 4 at home in Ypsilanti. Their rival was Central State. I'm unaware if that's still a FCS team. I'm lost on that front. gone 3 Wikipedia pages now through into that. But the point is, 1930s football was to college football the same way the Tungsten Arm Doyle jokes are to baseball. It's a different era entirely. We tied a game 6-6 that season, of course, against Army because we can't go without playing those pesky service academies and getting ourselves bogged down. At least this year we were able to stay away from.
I think they ran the triple option back then.
They probably
I think
did.
everyone ran the triple option.
We probably ran the triple option back then. We played Carnegie Tech in Pittsburgh, a rousing 14-3 win.
Offensive showdown right there.
It's interesting to see a couple of these. You don't really realize how old some of these stadiums are until you look at a 1935 Polo Stadium. We played Wisconsin at Camp Randall. We were playing at Notre Dame Stadium. We played Ohio State at Ohio Stadium, and then we played Army at Yankee Stadium, the other Yankee Stadium, obviously. But yeah, no, it's interesting to look at. I don't think Notre Dame Stadium will be mistaken for a new building by any means. But to think about it as something that was around before World War II, it's something to think about for sure.
Yes. Also, I have a correction to issue here. Notre Dame actually beat Ohio State in 1936. 2 full years earlier. So,
look at that.
Yes, the drought is not quite at 90 years.
7-2?
Yes, I was going to say that's the best part.
Here's one. The number 1 team in the country who we beat at home in a big rivalry game, Northwestern, presumably with Pat Fitzgerald as in his first year as head coach. The 1936 year apparently was quite a doozy for Notre Dame. Lost to Pittsburgh because
Elmer Layden led the way for the Irish that year.
We played Washington University of St. Louis, who was a Missouri Valley member, I assume. We'll figure out later. The big USC rivalry game, we tied 13-13 in front of allegedly 71,000 people at the Coliseum.
Fun fact, you can buy a schedule print of the 1936 Notre Dame football team on eBay for $13, or approximately 10.5 euros.
The team that placed last in the 1936 Midwestern Independence was Western State Teachers of Michigan.
Absolutely nuts.
Oh, actually, that was just Western Michigan University. Correction there.
Not the Western Michigan Teachers?
It's not some ridiculous. Well, it was the Western State Teachers then. It was later renamed Western Michigan University. So, unfortunately, that is not some random NAIA college for us to look up at a later date. That's just WMU. Nothing against WMU, though.
You have your classic history teachers, maybe some Phi-Ed. They go in, they score. It makes sense, right?
Your philo teacher scores than you. I'm not going back.
No. We got a lot more analysis, a lot more fun stuff. First, a word from our friends at Amazon. You're listening to the ShamTalk podcast.
You're listening to the ShamTalk podcast, the #1 Notre Dame athletics podcast in the world. We appreciate your support, and we're constantly looking for ways to improve the listener experience. In order to do that, we need your help. We have a pretty cool relationship with Amazon.com, and we'd like to invite you to join us. Amazon recently sent us a special link. When you use this link to buy something from Amazon, we receive a small percentage of the order. Best of all, it costs nothing extra for you. The link is available on the screen and in the description below. Once again, before you head to Amazon, start with our link. It doesn't cost you anything extra, and it helps us provide you with the best possible listener experience. Thanks for your support, and let's send it back to the guys.
As always, check out our link before you go to Amazon. It really helps us out, and we really do appreciate it. As well, thank you for listening. Share our podcast online, tweet about it, tweet us, like, subscribe, and check out all of our outlets. We do appreciate it. Let's talk a little bit more about the hype around game day. College Game Day is coming. We got the idea of the guest picker, but let's start what this game means to Notre Dame. Huge game for home, but this is the best home game since what?
I'm inclined to say the Bush push. You could make an argument, and I would absolutely listen to that argument for a number of games. Clemson last year, for instance. But I think that one, Clemson 2022, was going to be one that maybe that argument is made more in retrospect with the knowledge that it would end up being a huge Notre Dame blowout win. The expectation certainly wasn't that Notre Dame would lose the game, but also the stakes weren't exactly massive. Notre Dame won the game, and as a result, they ended up as the number 19 team in the country. I think they moved to. That's where they ended the year. The point being, the result didn't really determine much for the Notre Dame season other than being a big win for Freeman in his first year. Both Georgia games, not both Georgia games, the home Georgia game comes to mind, but Notre Dame was 4-8 the year before, so it's hard to market that as anything more than just a meeting of two historic brands. Cincinnati in 2021, again, I think a game that Notre Dame fans look back on more with hindsight than in terms of pre-game expectation. I think most people could have told you Cincinnati was a big game before the college football fans, but I think the general perception, at least as a student heading into the game, was like, oh, how is Cincinnati good? We'll show them their place. And then people realized Cincinnati was, in fact, a good football team. In terms of everyone from your most casual Subway alum to your most casual student to the diehards among all of us, everyone knows this game means a lot. It's two huge brands. It's a game that has playoff stakes. It is a game that is a rivalry, like we said, kind of renewed. It's going to be a game that is going to, we'll see the extent to which the away fans travel to. It's got all the makings of a really classic game, and I think you could, like I said, you can make an argument for a lot of games. Clemson 2020 would be great if there was a full stadium. Obviously, it was great atmosphere regardless, but it was kind of a petered down environment. I think it's difficult for me to say, given the stakes this game would have on the season, given the stakes it would have on Marcus Freeman's entire tenure at Notre Dame head coach if he wins this game, given the implications of what is likely to be Notre Dame's greatest test yet in terms of their ongoing battle to keep out opposing teams' fans, in terms of the sheer brand size of it and the numbers it will do on national television, and especially with reference to the Notre Dame's deal with NBC as it comes to a close and as they will, in all likelihood, we have no sources on this, but I think we can all read the tea leaves, renew. With all those factors coming together, it seems to grade out with an A on every single metric of what you want to give an instant classic at Notre Dame Stadium. We'll see how the on-field results match that, but until then, in terms of narrative, in terms of everything that makes a good game, I think the Bush Push is the one you go back to say it's its rival.
For the average fan, this is the first time they've seen Notre Dame atmosphere. They're going to see the commercials. They're going to see the B-roll footage. This is the first time they've seen that since 2020 for Clemson. That's sense for sure that everybody's watching this game. You got Iowa, Penn State on at the same time, but everybody knows the eyes are on this game.
People will go for the white out and then they'll switch over.
Yeah, exactly. The Brian Ferentz.
I know. I want to see if Ferentz can hit 25.
You can watch it after. Watch it after. But
it's not the same.
No, this is Notre Dame's commercial, and I think that everybody has to realize that how meaningful it is for the university to have your average fan, probably not Catholic, to know it.
Report out. It's a big time for brand stature.
Sounds like we dropped a point. We
dropped 2. We're 20
dropped
now.
2.
The sky is falling, although we are one above Michigan. So I guess there's small wins in that because now we get to be exactly one place above the rivals that aren't playing rivals anymore to the north.
Exactly.
It's the first game since Notre Dame joined that institution for really good academic schools that I cannot remember the name of right now for the life of me.
Oh, the AAU?
Yes, that's it.
We need to leave. It brought us down to, apparently.
Yeah. We finally joined a conference, folks.
The conference all endorses joining as the Ivy League so we can get back to the top 15.
I think the other thing to consider is that this is a Notre Dame team who has a solid roster. You're not expecting, am I going to have my second team players come in? Who is on my second team? Who was on my first team? It's a Notre Dame team that for the first time in a couple of years, they know their roster. If you take a look at the Cincinnati team, both teams had a stake to play for. Obviously, Cincinnati really held on to that stake. But Notre Dame had no clue who was going to be on the field. If a player played poorly in the first half, they could sub him out. Who are you going to play? What's the state of her injuries? There are a lot of things here. Notre Dame is going to be able to come in with a solid game plan. And hopefully that game plan works. And hopefully Jared Parker is going to be able to come in and know what he's going to do.
I will go back to the Ivy League note. For those unaware, today, 4-star offensive lineman Gerby Lambert committed to Notre Dame over Harvard. That's not a joke that those were his actual top 2 schools, along with Ohio State and Boston College, which is really just an eclectic.
Is he a Boston kid?
He's from Boston.
That makes a lot more sense.
I think he's like 10 minutes away from Boston College campus. But anyway, his final 2 official visits, I'm not mistaken, were Notre Dame and Harvard, which is just, listen, recruiting is always way less of a deal than people online seem to make it. If we lost the recruit to Harvard, I would simultaneously be in awe, with both respect to the kid and also enraged. But shout out to Lambert for committing to Notre Dame and proving once and for all that Notre Dame is indeed a more vaunted place in academia than Harvard.
Hey, that kid would have just been shopping down a different aisle.
Yeah, exactly. The aisle would indeed be the greatest academic conference in America. I don't know what the non-American academic leagues look like, but at least in America, the Ivy League is certainly as good as they come. But back to the original point, that Jake made. This is, I guess a more broad question. When was the last season that every position on the Notre Dame roster was, set in stone, at least to the extent it is this year, because it's not last year, it's not 2021, or I guess later on in 2021 you could probably say it was, but at least early on there was the Buckner.
4 weeks in.
Buckner versus Cone versus Pine.
Yeah.
Triumvirate of whatever that was on the three-headed monster. But yeah, no.
They were scary, all right.
Minimum since, I don't know, 2020 I think has got probably your best guess, which is not exactly eons ago, but it's still, 3 years is a decent amount of time to think. That was the last time Notre Dame had a football team where pretty much every position on the field, we all know who the starters are, and with the exception of the 2 guard spots, I don't think anyone is even really disputing who the starters are at those spots.
No.
There's not really any position battles. There's not really any arguments going on. The niche among us will debate whether Pat Coogan or Billy Schrauth or Rocco Spindler, or I'm trying to remember who else is in the Christophic, yes, there we go, is in the guard discussion. But other than that, I think everyone, we've got a consensus on who the guys are.
Yeah.
We know who the star is in Hartman and Estime. We know who the depth chart is at wide receiver, which is the most, probably I'd say, the quote-unquote weakest position on the roster, at least in terms of star power. And that's the first time, at least since 2020, I think that you can say that about Notre Dame team. And for a game like this, that matters a lot.
Game day's coming.
They're coming to our city.
I know.
Our census-designated area.
Exactly. Nobody knows what game day is going to be like. We haven't seen it yet, but it was the right decision. That's what we do know. We're so happy that they're not going over to Oregon for Colorado, Oregon.
I was never worried that they were.
No, but and they probably are going back to Boulder next week.
I
know. If Colorado USC, yeah, exactly.
I'll be eternally grateful.
If there's a miracle.
The last time Game Day went to
I
the
will
same
buy
school
a Shador.
twice in a season?
Last year I think
Was
we went to
it
Georgia
really?
twice, right?
I think they do it actually fairly.
Yeah, no.
Hey,
Hey, if they want to come back for USC,
But
I'm not
hey,
complaining.
what we're saying, they made the right pick, especially
say
with
on that
Clemson's
note,
loss.
Quick tangent here.
Yeah.
Would Notre Dame, if they win this game, do they become the team of the season? Because every year, and this isn't always the team that wins the national title. Tennessee last year, Cincinnati in 2021. There is, and we're not going to beat Colorado. I think we can all accept that. But in terms of like the contender schools, no disrespect, Dion. In terms of the schools that will realistically compete for the playoff, there's always kind of one trendy new pick every year, being Cincinnati, Tennessee.
Yeah.
If we beat Ohio State, do we become that team?
No, Washington is that team.
Wasn't having
Washington,
No, Washington is that
team.
team.
Is dang good.
I thought you said Notre Dame couldn't beat Colorado, and I was very confused.
I think we
I
could
hope
beat
we
Colorado.
could beat Colorado.
I hope Dion isn't listening to this podcast.
Dion, it's not personal.
Dion, I wore the sunglasses.
Call him coach. Come on now.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah.
No
Sorry,
Have some
Coach
respect for the man.
I am, to be clear, a fan of Coach Sanders, and I'm a fan of what he's doing in Colorado.
It's
but
great for the sport.
it's hard not to, have a couple chuckles at the disrespect narratives that are at play, both real and perceived. And hey, the best coaches do it. You saw Kirby last year at Georgia.
Got to. I mean, yeah, there's some problems at Georgia. I think maybe your coach should be able to teach men some basic virtue skills. But anyway, Game Day made the right choice, but I mean, where could it have gone? We got some good games this week. We got some fun stuff. I'll kick it off. Is that I personally think that the best game in college football history. I mean, you can make a couple decisions. It's either the Iron Bowl or the amazing at Michigan. Appalachian State comes in, beats them. First game of Big Ten Network history. I think my favorite game in Big Ten history for sure. A franchise that I continue to love. It's good to see them beat an actually good team. They're facing Wyoming this week, and that's a really, really good matchup between two good teams who have losses. Don't get me wrong. Wyoming lost to Texas last week. App State lost to North Carolina. But these are really, really good teams. And if there was ever this if they were ever to go to a mid-major, they won't really. They like the FCS schools for fun and then Power 5. If there was ever a mid-major game to go to, you go to that.
Yeah, I think my spotlight game is going on the game of the week for those of you who are interested in realignment politics. The most spiteful game ever played, perhaps. Oregon State travels to Washington State this weekend in prime time on
Fox, probably?
Is it on Fox?
I don't know.
I don't even want to know what network.
So that's the other game. You can go Penn State, Iowa, the Mountain West Bees, and Notre Dame, Ohio State.
They won their initial injunction. They are Pac-12 for now, and we will respect them as such.
We'll call the name the new Pac-12. We'll be nice.
The Pac-1 half.
Yeah, exactly.
Pac-1 2.0.
I am rooting for the Pac 2.0, to be clear. And I think that game's going to be I'm interested to see what the environment's like. These are two fan bases that over the last few months have kind of rallied together as we're in this, 2 for 1 and 1 for 2 or whatever you want to call it. And I don't know if Oregon State, Washington State was ever a rivalry, but it definitely feels like they're kind of an alliance right now. And
where is it?
It's in Palouse country, up in Wazoo. Pullman, Washington.
They got, two good games pretty early in the season. Yeah.
And the thing is, this is a game that has legitimate stakes. Oregon State's number 14, Washington's number 21. It's not unreasonable in any sense of the word to say these are two teams that could realistically compete for a Pac-12 title win and a New Year's Six game. And it would be a great story if either of them did it. But they have to play each other to do it. And I'm interested to see, is it going to be, more of the traditional environment of two conference rivals opening up conference play and, dueling it out, or is it, or not opening up conference play, but, two conference rivals that are playing each other and, playing for a potential New Year's Six spot, or is it going to be two teams that over the last few months have kind of, become allies in a fight against the TV money and all the powers that be and Pac-12 incompetence? I'm interested to see what that one's going to be, and I'm very interested to see how it is handled on Fox, if it is broadcast on Fox.
Washington State with the one home win against Wisconsin's team that's still continuing to find what it's going to look like under Fickell. Andrew, what are we thinking? Where would game day go if not Notre Dame?
For this week?
For this week.
There was never anywhere else. I'm sorry.
There's not even a fun...
No, I'm not saying there aren't, good games and whatnot, but, there was... In my, I know
there's no wrong answer that's right. No,
a lot of people on campus were like, "Oh, do you think it's going to come?" Well, I think so, but maybe this game or that game, no.
I guess I was in 3 weeks ago, but once that became clear,
that was the only one that might have had a puncher's chance. But I think what you talked about, given the rivalry, given what's at stake for Notre Dame, not just for Notre Dame, but what's at stake for Ohio State.
Yeah.
There's pressure on Marcus Freeman to win this game. There's more on Ryan Day.
He's got a job at stake.
It's so weird to think about the perceptions of the Notre Dame and Ohio State.
It is.
For the respective coaches, given the respective records at stake.
Yeah, Marcus Freeman is 13-5, and Ryan Day is 48-6.
One of these two,
and one of them is on the hot seat.
A legitimate case against. And that thing is, for like you said. Or perhaps you were going to say before I cut you off, Ryan Day, the defense against him is, he's 46-6, and he's lost 2 straight games to Michigan, but he's been really good outside those games. If he loses another top 15 game to a team not named Michigan, a team that, I think has a very real argument for number 1 team in the country, that argument for why he should stay Ohio State coaches, it's certainly not, a bad argument because he's still going to be 46-7, but it changes because, you could at least for Michigan say, hey, it's a rivalry game, it means a lot, and he's lost twice in a row, but Michigan is still a national title contender. Notre Dame, at least right now, is not that same perception. We'll see if at the end of the year and Sam Hartman, is a Heisman Trophy candidate. Maybe Notre Dame is a national title contender at the end of the year. As of right this second, Notre Dame is not in the same class as Michigan in terms of how Ohio State view that game. If he loses that game, the argument for why he should stay a coach, it takes a hit because that is a lot of what it rests on.
Is Day gone if he loses to Notre Dame and Michigan?
Yes.
He shouldn't be, but he will be.
Yeah.
Here's a question.
A lack of quarterback. Yeah.
I think that might be what keeps Day in the job because there's not really a clear. Fickell, if this was last year, but he's going to be rebuilding a Wisconsin program. Freeman.
Do they make a push?
Dare I say?
How about this one? Do they make a push for a former Notre Dame coordinator like Mike Elko or Clark Lee?
No, they're not ready for the big stage.
Running a top
I'm not saying they are, but what if Elko kills it at Duke this year?
What if they go 10-2? Running an elite program at Alabama and cutting his teeth off with Saban and figuring out an offense that has tons of weapons, much like Ohio State.
I like what you're saying, but I just don't think Tyler Buchner's ready for a coordinator or head coaching.
Exactly.
Yeah, no. Anyway, back to what we were saying about game day. I think I agree with Andrew. If this started the season, I think Clemson, Florida State had a very real argument. If Clemson doesn't lose to Duke, because that would have been 2 top 10 teams, which would be essentially the same as this is. But now we know Clemson, and I don't think Clemson's a bad team by any means. I think people were a little too quick to jump on the Clemson's done train, but they're definitely not a team that's going to contend for the national title. And as such, it's a game that it's an interesting game. It's a trap game for Florida State. It's a game that could redefine Clemson's season, which matters to Notre Dame, given we go on the road to play them in Death Valley in a few months. But it's not a game that's game day worthy with us on the schedule.
At the time of recording, no guest picker's been announced yet. Really quickly, 10 seconds each. Who we thinking, who we hoping?
I mean, you got to hope for Taylor Swift. It would be the greatest marketing win for Notre Dame's branding team in forever, I think. If you got, unquestionably the biggest star in pop right now, and to come out and, even have a 10-second soundbite. If she's wearing a Notre Dame hat, you're going to get an increase in applications, and you're going to get an increase in people making it out to the game perhaps because maybe Taylor's going to give a little performance. I don't know how realistic that is. My gut tells me 0. But if she will even pick up the phone, if you're Notre Dame, if you're game day, you give her a call because if you're Notre Dame, because that would be the biggest branding win for the Irish, and I can't even think of what the last big win for Notre Dame's branding would have been. But that would be it.
I'll go with Miles Teller. Solid celebrity, well-known,
normal pick.
Well-known actor, has been in Notre Dame games before. He's also a very big sports fan.
He's an Eagles guy, right?
So yeah. Some celebrities they're a fan of a team, but they're just kind of chilling out about it, whatever. They're not too big about it. Miles Teller was in the not in the very front row, but with the people in the Diamond Club during Philly's postseason games last year, jumping up and down, high-fiving everyone. So I think he'd be a great fit, both in terms of the connection, but also in terms of the energy level that he's going to bring and just the entertainment value that he'd actually have on game day itself.
It wouldn't be a recording without Andrew bringing up the Phillies and without
sorry.
JJ going over
we
his...
made it very far.
That's a fair point.
I have to get on JJ too, and JJ going over his 10-second allotments. Yes. So we want everybody here. Well, thank you for listening. Please, if you have questions, things you want to have us talk about in the next podcast, you can tweet us at JJPost, JAYJAY, at NDSMC Observer. We'll get to those. We're going to try to do more weekly, or at least for the big games. And
you can also
always
tweet me at _AndrewMCG.
Thank you. Check out our content that's going to come out on our main channels. Shamrock Sports, full show will be on Friday night. The Irish Insider for the Observer, as well as check out right now on NDTV's YouTube page our full interview with the guy calling the game this Saturday, Noah Eagle. Straight a couple years out from Syracuse, a 2019 grad doing big things in the sports media industry. It'll be a good time. Well, thank you for listening to the ShamTalk podcast from Duncan Student Center. It's been a joy to talk about the game with you. We hope your game day goes well, and go Irish.
If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please subscribe and leave a rating and review. To stay up to date with ShamTalk and get all our behind-the-scenes content, you can follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Notre Dame Television. That's all for now. Thanks for listening, and go Irish!